Welcome everybody to Inspiring Conversations. My name's Kezia Luckett and I am so excited that I am joined today by AdaPia D Errico, coming all the way from Canada. And the reason that I'm so excited is I saw AdaPia's phenomenal speech on a Goldcast video, and it really just touched my heart and soul in places that I didn't even know could be touched, when she was talking about being trapped in a life that on the outside looked like a beautiful Renaissance painting, but on the inside she was feeling like a whole essence and being was just disappearing every year that she went through on this journey. So AdaPia, thank you so much for taking the time out.
Hi, thank you, Kezia. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here speaking to you and your community that you've built around you.
Not a problem at all. Now, I have obviously just given a very small snippet. Can you expand a little bit more on your story and why it's so important for every woman out there to hear?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. Um, so the video that you saw, the Goldcast video, is a 5-minute edited with like the beautiful. So Goldcast is a motivational video company, and they found a video of this 20-minute talk that I gave last April in an auditorium in Los Angeles, and it was part of an event called Truth Telling for Truth Seekers, where people would come up on stage, speakers like myself, and talk about usually quite shameful episodes of life and things that we don't normally talk about. Shame and silence are co-conspirators in keeping us in suffering.
Yeah.
And so when we share our stories, we heal ourselves and we heal others. I truly believe this. There's a healing that happens just at that heart level. Like you said, you felt something when you saw the video, and it moves you in ways that then you start to think, and then you start to reflect. And so I did this talk, this 20-minute talk, and Goldcast found the video online. And then they made they put it together with different clips of, they used the Renaissance painting. So they did a multimedia video. And what's really interesting about this whole situation is I didn't know when the video would launch, and I actually didn't get to see it before it launched. Which was shocking. So there's a whole other element there of like creative control and having creative control. So that's on me in some ways. And so the reason that this is important is that the video came out, and what they did is they extracted the story of leaving this marriage, and how I'm talking about the fact that when we're living for other people or making decisions not really based on what we want or need, like I didn't listen to the voice inside that was saying like, this is not right. Like I was 22, and I always said, oh, I'm not going to get married till I'm 30, but I kind of caved to this pressure of like, well, you're done college, he's a great guy, and I did love him, but there was something inside that was just like, no, no, no. And I was like, no, no, no. This is a good life for me, all the reasons. And so I let my head take over my heart. And I said, yes. And even though I tried really hard, as we do, in life, we're all trying really hard. I was just dying inside, dying in all the ways that I just, over time. And then finally I had this moment where I say my soul set me on fire, where I just couldn't. And I realized like, this needs to stop. And the thing, he knew it too. It's not like he was, nobody's blind about these things. We all know, right? There's elements where the psyche and the ego, this so well. I don't even need to tell you, but like we put ourselves in denial. Yes. And so it was finally like this release for both of us. It was like a release. And honestly, like it was such an amicable separation and everything. And now he has a baby, which is what he always wanted. I never wanted kids. Like I have my soulmate. And so there's these like huge lessons. And I do believe when we follow our heart and our soul, like it's not gonna be like easy. But it's always going to end with what we need, and it ends well, because when we honor ourselves, the path completely changes, and it just feels right. And that's really important.
Yeah, because for anybody looking at your picture on the outside, you know, you moved as soon as you got married, you were in Italy, you lived in Lake Como, you built fabulous relationships. You know, on the outside, it looked like you had a wonderful marriage. And, it, you know, as you say in your story, you know, there wasn't kind of abuse or any of that going on. You just knew in your heart of hearts that this wasn't how you wanted to spend the rest of your life. And it was, interestingly enough, you obviously talked about this in the video, that it was the concern of disappointing your parents, disappointing your husband, disappointing your friends. And there was just one conversation when you had reached that point, and I think you talk about being in a hospital and reaching that point where, you know, the noise in your head had just become like epic proportion. Your heart wasn't in the place that it needed to be. And all of a sudden you said, no, no more. And you had that difficult conversation with your father. Can you just tell everybody what he said?
Sure. Yeah. Well, for the record, first I told my husband.
That's always a good one.
That came first. That came first. And then, so it was, you're right. The irony of all of it is that I didn't want to hurt anyone. And and that's the thing. It's like, we have to have those uncomfortable conversations like right away to get some clarity. Like this, I mean, there would be no story if it had gone any differently. Right. But, you know, so we have to face those really uncomfortable conversations, and we gain so much clarity when we do. Like for me and my father, like he had a really hard time letting me go in terms of, you know, getting married and all that kind of stuff. And he's a very strict man of Italian upbringing, and so I was really worried that I would bring shame upon the family. Like that, I mean, that's kind of it. Like a lot of Italians still think that way, and they're very tied to their traditions, which it's wonderful, but that can also keep us trapped. So it was really scary for me to tell him, because I was so worried about disappointing him and the family. And I always, you know, I always thought he just wanted me to have that life. It needed to look a certain way. I needed to be successful, all these things. But when I told him, he actually said, you need to come home. You're not happy. You're not fulfilled. And what that did for me was like, it snapped something. Cause I thought, well, I was like, what, pardon me? I thought you were going to yell at me. I thought you were going to, you know, berate me. Like I was ready for that. But instead he showed me a side of him that in my growing up, never thought existed in him, because it wasn't really what he showed me either. And so that moment changed our relationship. And I realized, like, I've been projecting on you also. And then it, you know, there's that started to change, because I really then started to realize, like, how well do I know people, and how well does anyone know me if we're not being really open and having loving conversations? And that's hard for people. It's not natural. It's not necessarily how we're taught or raised, especially his generation. I mean, we have to look at it generationally too. So yeah, so he was just, you know, he just said, come home. And it was like, it was just really allowed me to do that.
And the thing that I find the most interesting, and I think it's definitely something that women and men, obviously, it's not just a women-specific phenomenon, is the fact that actually, in your mind, other people's happiness was more important than your own. In your mind, you know, keeping your husband happy, keeping your friends happy, keeping your parents happy was more important than your own. And that was the bit really that kind of sung to me when I watched the video, is that how many of us are living lives that actually aren't making us happy because we believe that other people's happiness is more important than our own.
Exactly. That's exactly it. We live for other people, and most of the time we don't know. We
No.
don't know that we are.
No, and interestingly enough, obviously we were talking before we pressed record, and you were telling me two things that I found quite interesting, and I really wanted to touch upon because, again, it's something that I really think that people need to A, listen to and hear, and B, to start processing what happens. The first was the fact that you just mentioned that you didn't actually know really until the minute that this video was going out, that this was going out into the world. And that in itself is quite a miracle. And, you know, obviously in the Women of Contribution, we talk about miracles being around the corner at any moment in time. But with that miracle, which has been fantastic in putting a story out to the world and getting people to think, there's also been the reverse side of it, which has been with the amount of women, men that you've had that have come to you and said, thank you so much. There have been some people that haven't been as complimentary. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. And this has been a really huge lesson for me in facing fears
Mm.
and being challenged at a really deep level to step into this purpose, to step into this path.
Mm.
You know, miracles are such an interesting thing because it's like we project stories onto miracles too. And we think that they're, you know, oh, a miracle is something like really amazing and wonderful and love and all these things. And it can be. And sometimes it isn't only that.
Mm.
And so, like you were saying, I've received hundreds of messages from people, and I try to respond to everyone. But also there's been a lot of trolling on the video. It's on, you know, it went on Facebook mostly, and the last time I checked it was like 30 million views and like well over 150,000 shares, which is astounding. It's
Mm.
astonishing. But if you read the comments, they can be quite intimidating,
Mm.
uh, because they're very negative. And that's been really hard. And some people have personally written to me with very negative, hateful, even violent comments, which was really shocking to me. And, you know, and I retreated emotionally. I retreated because I just thought, I'm trying to do a good thing. Like, I never thought anybody would take it that way. And there again, we have no idea how anybody takes anything. We just don't. And it's been a real big lesson in understanding that this is going to happen. I
Mm.
mean, I have a beautiful network of people in my life, many who are also doing public work, good work, and
Mm.
they also get hated on a lot. And you know, as much as I would like to believe that one day this won't exist, that we can all actually coexist in a more loving way,
Mm.
currently that's not the reality. So number one, you know, face reality for me. Number two, don't I mean, I had to let myself really feel it. Like, it was a really big lesson for me in facing my fear of rejection and being misunderstood at scale, like
Yeah.
at scale. And the shame and the judgment, everything I say in my talk, I say I was so afraid of exactly this. Everybody would hate me, they would judge me, they would shame me, they would blame me. I never imagined it would be on a like that level of,
Global scale. Yeah.
yeah, of a global scale. But it's been a really big lesson in not letting that get me down and feeling it and allowing it to release emotionally out of my system. But also, like, I'm not going to stop. And I know I'm not advocating divorce. I'm not advocating just, you know, up and leaving. I'm really talking about honoring the self. And the more I talk to people, like even like speaking with you and like knowing that everybody gets a bit of this negativity, some more, some less, but we can't let it stop us because we're on a soul's purpose in life, every single one of us. And we all feel it. I know that every single person feels there's something more, something greater that they're meant to do.
Yeah.
And we're going to be challenged by these miracles. If we can see them as miracles, we're going to be challenged out of that comfort zone to do the work we're meant to do, because there's people who can't stand up and tell their story. And I have to remind myself of that. This is not, and it's never been about me. But more I see that this is about those also who cannot. They simply cannot. They might be in danger of their lives if they speak up about their situations. And so I do this for them.
And I love what you just said there about the fact that ultimately your biggest fear came true. You know, your biggest fear of being judged, of having shame, and all of those things actually came true on a scale that probably when it went out, you never imagined that it would be on such a big scale. And, you know, we were talking beforehand that when this happens, and this is what we talk about in the Women of Contribution group, it means that you've triggered something in somebody else. That's their stuff, not yours. But actually, it takes a really special woman to be able to acknowledge it for what it is and be grateful and thankful that actually something has happened. So they've triggered something that will hopefully help them on their journey to be able to grow and become a better person and understand what's going on in their lives. And yeah, I love the fact that you pulled out on that, you know, that you talked about that, because it's really important.
Yeah, thank you. It is. And it's important for all of us, because our natural reaction, like that instinctive, like ego, I'm going to close up, I'm going to defend myself, and I'm going to attack you. So the only way to end that cycle is to step back and see it as not me. It's really not me. It's not even about me. And knowing that they might be saying things about me, but they're not. I know who I am.
Yeah.
I know who I am. I know. And therefore I can also be compassionate towards them and forgiving, which is the hardest thing. But I had to learn to be compassionate and forgiving with myself, because that is a reflection of what was in me.
Yeah.
If we want to look at it from a much larger, maybe spiritual perspective, but those lessons that come to us are lessons. And if we can see them that way, they're much easier to navigate and to really let go of the story, so that I can let go of the fear that's holding me back in other parts of my life as well. And not be afraid. And there's that fine line of like stepping into purpose and power and being like really aggressive about it. So, you know, it's not about, it's a lot about confidence and feeling confident. But that confidence is in knowing that you have what it takes to keep going and being compassionate and allowing that person or those people's paths to play out. It's not my role.
Yeah.
I'm not a healer. I'm me. I'm trying to figure myself out on a daily basis. And it's up to a greater power to help those people on their path. And the more I can step back and take my emotions out of it or release my emotions, that the easier it is for me to focus that energy, because I need my energy for me. I need it for my work, and not waste it on feeling hurt or being hurt or wondering or being afraid, because and I had a few moments of deep despair.
Yeah.
It really got to me, like deep despair. Like I really didn't understand. And you know, I got over that, and then I just, you know, I zoomed back out and I said, okay, well, I'm safe, I'm good, and this is life, and I have to keep going.
I love that. And from the perspective for those people that are potentially listening to this, and they're reaching that point in their life where they go, do you know what? Everything that's on the outside is not representing what I feel on the inside. And you made that stand, and, you know, you talked with your husband and came to an arrangement. You spoke with your father, who said, look, you know, I just want you to be happy. How easy was that step of then moving away and re-understanding, because you were 22 when you got married, re-understanding who you were, who was AdaPia, you know, what made you happy? What was the process like of that part of the journey? Because we saw the first part, but we haven't really understood the second part.
Yeah, it was long. That was 9 years ago. It's been a long process. And what's really interesting is until I gave that talk, until I started preparing for that talk, I didn't understand this. I didn't know how much shame I was still carrying. Like, I didn't know, like, I'm very strong. And so it was devastating to leave. I mean, we had a dog that was like my heart and soul was that dog. And that was like one of the hardest things for me. And just like leaving that life and all of it, it was really, really difficult. And I had no idea what would come of it. I had no idea. I know I could go home. But I also know that, like, life goes on. I mean, I'm not a quitter, you know, and so I focused on work is really what I did. So for the first, I really focused on work and myself, because as you said, I had no idea who I was. I had been living, expectations, other people's expectations. And even, you know, even the abstraction of doing what I thought they wanted for me. So it just like this, a lot of really not knowing who I was. And so I began to unravel myself. And it was the practices of yoga and meditation actually that anchored me. And even back then I didn't know that that's what was happening, because I went into yoga from the athletic perspective. I was like, I'm, you know, 90 minutes, 900 calories. Like, I can't waste a second of this time. Like, I was like very, you know, I had these control issues because I had body dysmorphia. That was part of the suffering that was coming through from that marriage, is that I felt out of control in my life, and the only thing I could control was my body. And so I really abused it. So I had this whole like reworking internally, and I spent a lot of time in self-reflection. Actually, I spent a lot of time alone. I made new friends. I didn't date. I was like, I need to know who I am. And I got really straight and strong around myself and what I would tolerate, not tolerate. But I just focused on what I could build and what I saw in I guess like a positive light. Like, I didn't try to find somebody right away. Like, that actually happened quite naturally a year later when I met Andrew, who's my husband today. And that was a challenging relationship too. I mean, it was like really hard, because relationships are like the arena of growth. I mean, you can't grow by yourself, not really. The relationships, any relationship is going to show you who you are. It's a mirror. And but I just really focused on what felt right. That's when I started to tune into my intuition, because I had completely suppressed it. And that was my lesson, is like, I have a very strong intuition, and we all do. And I just wouldn't listen to it. I would just push it down, push it down, push it down. Don't tell me that. Don't show me that. No way, no how. And so I just started to reconnect to who I really was. And I spent a lot of time in self-reflection, deep contemplation, long walks. I mean, I don't know. It was like this process that was happening on a higher level in my body, in my mind. And slowly, I started to understand how that process plays out in my external life. And in the past 9 years, I've learned a ton of lessons, because I still had lots of ego. I had ego identity around career. I had ego identity around my capabilities, all these things. And so multiple egos and what I call the acceptable identity, like multiples of those, have been falling away over and over and over again. And I just keep coming back to who I am, really, to what's important, what has meaning. And it's always something, it's a feeling. And when I listen to that, I've also completely altered and redesigned a life to be really in alignment to that. And it keeps getting better and better. And I think without that foundation, a really strong, like, spiritual foundation, I wouldn't have been able to face what happened with the video. I think I would have really crumbled.
Because many people would look at something like that and think, wow, what an amazing opportunity. But actually, just it is, but just in itself, there are consequences of things going out, and the way that the way that we're perceived, the way that we view ourselves, the way that society perceives us. And I just want to say a massive thank you for being so honest about that, because I think often, you know, some people get kind of blindsided with the fact that, oh, well, you've had like millions of people looking at your story. Well, that's great, but it's what comes out of that, how people's lives are changed, but also how our lives are changed. And obviously that situation for you changed your life, you know, in many different ways. It wasn't just one facet, it was multifaceted, and actually is, you know, the woman that you are today, and the woman that we're seeing and hearing today. So thank you so much for our listeners and our watchers that are listening and thinking, gosh, you know, I just really want to speak, you know, and find out a little bit more. Where can people find out more about you, what it is that you're doing? I know that you're writing, I know that you're speaking. Where can people find you?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's been such an honor to be able to share more openly about my story. And so I was gifted with a very unique name, which was a bit of a trauma growing up with, like, you know, kids are mean.
Oh, yes.
But you know, same with you, your name.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is I'm really easy to find online. So even if you just Google AdaPia, I will come up. But my website is adapiaderrico.com. And yeah, so I'm really pursuing my passion of writing, and I've finished a book. So I'm going to be publishing a book that really goes into a little bit more of my story, but also my practices of how I'm building the self-awareness, self-inquiry. It's really a journey of self-mastery, but like understanding how to use different practices and tools. And I'm doing more public speaking. I love it. I love holding space, facilitating, and I also do a lot of, well, I do some executive mentoring, which is something different, but I really love to see people shine through. And a lot of times that's shining through what the mind is putting in front of us, that are beliefs and judgments and biases, and getting to the heart and living from that place. So it's adapiaderrico.com. I'm on Instagram mostly. I have a podcast called Real Wealth, Real Health, and there's a Facebook page for that. And everything is on my website.
Well, we will post all of that information anyway, so that people can find you and continue the journey, because obviously we've just touched upon a really small snippet in your life and your mission and your purpose. So from my heart to yours, thank you so much for taking the time out. And I'm looking forward to kind of watching the rest of the story unfold. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.